So should Tonya Harding compete in the Olympics, which begin February 23rd in Norway? We have 4 views on that. Ira Berkow is sports columnist for the New York Times. Filip Bondy is a sports writer and columnist for the New York Daily News. Gary Visconti was a member of the 1964 and 68 Olympic figure skating teams. He's now a skating coach and also president of the Southern California Olympians, an alumni group of Olympic athletes. He joins us from Los Angeles. And Jill Pilgrim is a sports lawyer and a member of the governing body for track and field in the United States. Welcome, all of you. Mr. Berkow, are these charges credible?
Well, they may be credible and they may not be credible. We don't know. There are no facts, hard facts right now. And it's interesting that Tonya Harding's lawyer said that anything that's to be proved will have to be proved in a court of law, which is normally the way we do things in this country.
Mr. Bondy?
Well, I think what we do have as fact is Tonya's own confession, public confession, that she in fact was responsible for covering this thing up. We don't know at this point. I agree with Ira. We certainly can't convict her of planning it, but we can say that she was in fact involved in covering up the incident. And I would argue that that is enough to breach the sportsmanship contract that she has with the U.S. Figure Skating Association.
Well, what is the sportsmanship contract?
Well, it's appropriately vague. I have it here if you want to hear it.
It's vague, it's general,
No,
it's broad, but it has nothing to do with the competition itself. We're talking about a skating event. Tonya Harding, according to her, and if we do believe they're innocent until proved guilty, then we have to go along with what she has to say, that she had no prior knowledge of the assault. Therefore, if she had no prior knowledge, she had no effect on the results, or on the results of national championships, or on the results of the Olympics.
But what about Mr. Bondy's comment that she has admitted that she stayed silent at the very least?
Well, but that is not an issue as far as influencing the events themselves.
It's certainly an issue of sportsmanship.
But it is not necessarily an issue of sportsmanship.
Gentlemen.
Well, I think that my basic view is that she's entitled to a hearing and to present her points and her evidence and any evidence of innocence that might be available to her. I think it's certainly not, as is stated, good sportsmanship not to divulge the attack or knowledge after the fact of the attack. But I'm not so convinced that that's enough to say you're going to lose your opportunity to be in the Olympics that you've worked for so many years.
Mr. Visconti in Los Angeles, do you find these charges credible?
Well, right now, looking at what we have, they're creditable. But whether they're going to be proven is another story. We are all judged by the company we keep. And if Tonya did know immediately after the incident in Detroit, I feel personally that she should have gone to the authorities immediately and vindicated herself and talked about what she knew. That's number one.
And do you think that because she failed to do that, should that be enough to disqualify her?
In itself, no. But I can foresee Tonya skating in the Olympic Games, and with due justice of law, if things are brought up against her, it will take, of course, time. It will be after the Olympic Games. But unfortunately, this is all going to take time. As it stands right now, as an Olympian, as a president of the Olympians here on the West Coast, she should skate in the Olympic Games. But I think the United States Skating Association and the U.S. Olympic Committee are waiting for the proper authorities to come up with proof and evidence that she was totally involved.
Well, you're never going to get proof positive before a trial. And so I would argue that you're going to have to make some subjective judgments along the way. And that in this case, what she has admitted to, don't forget there are other victims here. Nancy Kerrigan is going to go through considerable trauma if, in fact, she has to skate with Tonya Harding. A skater who is completely innocent of this, who would be eligible to skate, in Michelle Kwan, and she, in a sense, could be called a victim of a conspiracy as well if she's kept out of it, in the broadest sense of the term. So you do have other people. The Kerrigan coaches have asked Harding to withdraw, and so you do have an initiative here to get Harding off the team.
Can I interject some rule of law here? I mean, I think that public opinion is just one aspect of this. There is an Amateur Sports Act that guarantees the right of athletes and others to compete in the Olympics. And the purpose of that act, and what I'm really concerned about here, is this kind of lynch mob mentality that says before anything is proved, just based on accusations of individuals who have a lot to gain by making those accusations, we are going to take this woman off the team.
But we're basing it not on an accusation.
Well, that's one aspect of it, and I too agree with Mr. Visconti that just the admission of after-the-fact knowledge is not in itself enough.
And she did admit that she made a mistake. Now, I'm not sitting here and deciding as judge and jury whether she did or did not do any of these things. But the thing is that she admitted a mistake. So do we? And if that's all she did, and we don't really know whether she did any more than this, do we hang her for this? And by hanging her for this, in effect, we call a death sentence on her participation in the Olympics.
But we're not sending her to jail.
Wait, but if it turns out that she had absolutely nothing to do with it, then she was not allowed to skate in the Olympics.
But she said she had something to do with it.
She had nothing to do with prior knowledge.
Right. I'm just
afterward,
talking about after.
only afterward, which is, again, nothing to do with the event itself.
Well, what about that argument, Mr. Bondy, that there's nothing lost by letting her compete, and then if the courts later convict her, it can be taken away?
There is something to be lost by letting her compete. Again, I remind you that Nancy Kerrigan has to put up with this and is not very pleased with it by what her coaches have said. There's another skater who would skate at the Olympics who will not skate there if Harding skates there. So there are people who lose a great deal if Harding does skate.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%. I know all three of the girl skaters and their coaches. And think about the message that we're giving to the young Americans who are Olympic bound or have Olympic aspirations. I think we're in a very grave situation here. I've been involved with the world of skating for 39 years, and I think that the authorities should try, most expediently, to try to come to a decision with some solid facts.
Well, Gary Visconti, how can the U.S. Olympic Committee proceed here now?
How can they proceed?
In less than 3 weeks, how can they make such a determination?
I think they have to wait to gather the facts from the authorities, the law, the FBI, the state agencies. That's the only way they can do it.
There's another avenue here. What they can do is initiate a proceeding, a hearing, I believe, on the U.S. Figure Skating Association level.
That's correct, Jill.
So what they can do is initiate a hearing and let that hearing proceed and not wait for the criminal process, and I think they should. But ultimately, I think the onus at this point, I mean, it's very serious what's happened. There are all kinds of implications. There's a hard luck story for every person who makes an Olympic team. There was 1 or 2 people behind them who just didn't make it. And I think what needs to happen now is if Tonya Harding is truly guilty, she needs to withdraw. If she is not guilty, I support her effort to fight for her position on the team.
I've personally spoken with about 15 of my close friends in the Olympian alumni. And I think for the sake of the Olympics, for the sake of everyone involved, and for sake of our country as far as competing top-notch, I personally would advise her to withdraw at this time. And that does not at all show that she's guilty.
See, I have a totally different view of this. I see the Olympics not as a sacred right, because we've known what the Olympics have been all about. There's been so much hypocrisy, so much of cheating going on. I mean, I see it as a sports event. And I know there are a lot of flags being waved, and there are a lot of anthems being played, but I still see it as a sports event. And when Gary talked about this, a message being sent to the young skaters, I think he's wrong, as far as I'm concerned, in the message. The message is greater than that, and the message has to do with the with the fundamental principles of this country, and that is you're innocent until proved guilty, and due process.
What about that, Mr. Bondy, that really the legal standard should apply here, and anything less
just
robs her?
I'm astounded that I appear to be in the minority as far as believing that covering something like this up should not be enough to bump somebody from the Olympics. I'm astounded that Here's one of the most
All
heinous...
you have is an accusation. You're
No. We're talking about the admission now.
After the fact
Right.
knowledge,
After
and then adding to it that she covered up. I mean, cover up to me
she
implicates
said
her in doing a lot of things to, and you know, that's
She
what
said she
happens. You
was
take a little
aware.
bit of information and you expand it, and then you have you know, something that's bigger than what was really stated in the first place.
What if the district attorney's office does release some of these, I guess, tapes of conversations or videotape that they have that Mr. Hovitt, Galluli's lawyer, just referred to, and so a cover-up is established? Then what would your position
She's
be?
entitled to a hearing at which she can explain what she said, why she said it, what the context of it is. You can take any piece of tape and present it and then say it meant one thing when it really meant something else. She's entitled to present her defense or her explanation if in fact there is one.
And even though all this sounds credible, and it may very well be, but we have to also understand that today Mr. Galluli admitted to an intent to commit perjury and to conspire to perjure. And he also took a plea bargaining. The maximum sentence was 20 years and $300,000. He took 2 years and $100,000. So he had some motivation for some of the things he was doing today.
Other sports...
Let me just ask Mr. Visconti this. Apparently, according to these reports, her lawyer is saying she will only answer the charges, though, in a court of law. Does that tie the U.S. Olympic Committee's hands, then?
I'm not an official of the Olympic Committee, but it's my personal opinion, being involved, that if there was a hearing and if she was brought to Colorado Springs or wherever the hearing was, she must answer honestly. That's number one. And the facts that she gives them, of course, will be creditable into a decision. Whether that decision is going to be able to be made prior to the women's skating event on the 23rd of February is another story. We do have a 48-hour grace period that we can replace Tonya within 48 hours prior to the women's event.
And must she participate if they call her?
If they call her to be on the team?
No,
or to be
if
in
they
the
call
hearing?
her to come to a hearing.
Well, I think she would be pretty foolish not to appear
Jill, I
and
agree
defend,
with you. I agree with you 100%, yes.
Yeah. I can speak from my experience sitting on arbitration panels for USA Track and Field, where we have hearings on a regular basis, mainly on issues of drug doping. And I can tell you that I've sat on a panel of arbitrators where all the evidence and information that was presented to me before the hearing appeared to implicate the athlete. And then there have been witnesses who have come in and have given testimony that I felt intuitively were lies. And then the athlete has sat in front of me and very openly appeared to tell the truth and change my opinion, because people around them tried to cover up for the mistakes that they made, and the athlete came in and said, look, this is what happened, and was very honest. And I've sat on panels where that's happened, so I know that it is very important to have that hearing and to get all the facts on the table.
And we've seen in so-called obvious cases, open and shut cases, the Menendez trial recently, the prosecutor said, this is an open and shut case. The jury couldn't convict. We saw this in the first Rodney King trial. We've seen this in the Bobbitt
But again, we're not
case.
trying to send Tonya Harding to jail here. We're trying to bump her from what you yourself said is just a sporting event.
Why are you not trying to send her to jail? If she did something illegal, in your theory, you should have sent her to jail.
That is a different process. It's a completely different process and a far more serious
Again,
one.
she admitted to a mistake as far as, which had nothing to do at this point with the activities and the sports events involved. Because of that, I say let her skate in this sports event in Norway.
Well, Mr. Berkow raises a point, which is, what is the U.S. Olympic Committee's major responsibility? I mean, are the factors that are most important the responsibility to the athletes? Is it to sportsmanship? Is it to the U.S. chances for competing successfully? What are they supposed to really look at, Mr. Berkow?
Well, the U.S. Olympic Committee is going to try to have the so-called cleanest kinds of Olympics, send the best people possible. Of course, Tonya Harding won the national championship. Even if Kerrigan had been in it, Tonya Harding would have come in. If Kerrigan would have won, Tonya Harding would have come in second. Both of them would have gone to the Olympics. But yeah, the USOC, besides wanting to keep an image, they have to be very conscious of their image. There's money involved for all these people. they want to try to send the best and cleanest and purest possible team.
They would be
more than happy to get Tonya Harding out of this thing.
It says, yeah, they would be, I believe.
And Leroy Walker said so.
USFSA's Code of Ethics. Members must exemplify the highest standards of fairness, ethical behavior, and genuine good sportsmanship in any of their relations with others, and any person who acts, statements, or conduct is considered detrimental to the welfare of figure skating is subject to the loss of the privilege of the registration.
Right. Now Phil, you've been this may pertain to all Olympic athletes. This may pertain to all Olympic athletes, and you've been around enough to know that if this pertained to all the Olympic athletes, we might send 3.
That's absolutely true. And believe me, the U.S. Figure Skating Association is probably guilty of invasion of privacy on a number of levels that we can only begin to get into now in terms of monitoring the athletes. However, again, I would argue that that is irrelevant to this particular case.
Let me get the former Olympic athlete in here. Go ahead, Mr. Scott.
Ira, I'm just thinking, do we have a precedent on this? Between the 4 of us, can you think of any international event such as this have ever been in the last 30 years?
Along these lines?
Along these lines.
Where someone's been attacked by...
Yes. I cannot think of one,
no,
Jill.
No, I can't. But as far as not allowing someone to participate in the Olympics and then something happening after, of course, it was the Butch Reynolds case, in which he contended that he was wrongly accused of using drug-enhancing chemicals, and he won $27 million in a United States court. He's never going
to be on the team.
Right.
Yes.
You know, Jill, I think we'd be in a lot better situation if we had 6 months prior to the Olympics.
Oh, absolutely.
We'd feel a lot more comfortable.
Time
but we
is
shouldn't
definitely
let the time
on Tonya's side.
Yes.
And Tonya is counting on that as well.
Yes.
Let me close by asking you one question about public opinion, because apparently it is swinging definitely against Tonya Harding. Even this weekend, a CNN poll found, I think, 58% of Americans didn't want her on the team. The head of the USOC said public opinion would be a factor. Should it?
I don't think public opinion should be a factor at all. The people who are, the officials and administrators who are in charge of doing what's right ought to do what's right, no matter how many people are screaming any way they are.
Based on the facts, right, Ira? Based on the facts.
Absolutely,
That
Gary.
point of view is the reason for the Sports Act, to protect the rights of athletes, because if you leave it to the officials who have competing interests, some of them financial and some of them not related to fielding the best team, then you have situations when the appropriate people who have earned their spot on the team don't go to the Olympics, and we want to take that discretion out of the hands of those officials.
Jill, we have to be careful, Jill, you know, that in a situation like this is not an elected position. Tonya Harding was not elected by the American people as the U.S. skating champion. She earned it. So that's number one. So public opinion, because of the media swaying one way or another, either bringing some facts out and others not out, that shouldn't really enter into it. She earned the right to be on the team, and she's on the team. Now, if it goes back that while she earned the right to be on the team, she did some damage to other competitors, that's the story.
And if she conspired afterward, and if she concealed afterward, then she should be judged again in a court of law and made to stand any kind of punishment for concealing the conspiracy. As far as the events are concerned, that's a different story.
Yeah.
The polls also show, one last question to you, Mr. Bondy, that most Americans now think athletes are so motivated by greed that they'll do anything to win. Are you surprised at that kind of a finding?
I'm certainly not surprised by the finding. I personally don't think it's true, but I'm not surprised that the public perceives it. A lot of it does have to do with the media coverage of athletes, of the close coverage of contractual figures. We talk about how much money athletes make. We never talk about how much money the owners make. And I think that that's part of the problem, and it's part of the problem that the media itself has created. But again, public opinion aside in this case, I think that we have to consider the facts that we already have.
I can foresee at the Olympic Games, if Tonya and Nancy Kerrigan compete, it will probably be the most watched event since the Super Bowl. So the network is going to win.
Well, that's all the time this event has. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.